It's the middle of a storm so fierce it can rewrite reality, and you realize the cold isn't the deadliest thing outside your door. My first place alone was in a remote pocket of South Dakota, 5 winters back. It was the isolation I craved. For years, that silence was a gift. Then came the February blizzard that turned my truck into a frozen coffin on my own driveway. The door lock was a solid block of ice. I was stranded with no one to call. My only chance was to reach the nearest house, nearly half a mile through a wall of white. By the time I stumbled onto the porch, I was so numb I almost didn't care who answered. The man who opened the door was named Joe. He was quiet, letting me in from the screaming wind without a fuss. The warmth should have been a relief, but his eyes, they never settled. They danced from me to the floor, to the ceiling, like he was listening to a conversation I couldn't hear. I pretended to sleep on his couch just to avoid talking. That's when the noises started. Thumps, scrapes, directly above me. The problem was his house didn't have a second floor. I lay there frozen, not from cold, but from dread. Then a slam so violent shook the ceiling. I bolted upright, and he was just standing in the doorway, watching. He hadn't made a sound. Before I could speak, he was on me. We crashed to the floor, his hands at my throat. He was screaming about her, about how she was lonely and I'd be good company. I fought, pure instinct. I shoved him off, snatched my coat, and ran back into the blizzard without it. The next house held a normal family. They let me in, scared and shaking. In the morning, over coffee, I described Joe. The husband knew the name. He told me Joe's wife vanished a decade ago. Most folks believe he was responsible. The body was never found. The worst monsters don't live in the storm. They let it deliver you to their door. I still drive past that house. I never see him, but I always feel that itch on my skin, the memory of a ceiling that shouldn't have had anything to walk on. The next story is from upstate New York, where a different blizzard brought a visitor who defied logic. I work from home, finance stuff. When the historic storm warnings hit, I stocked up and hunkered down. By nightfall, the world outside my window was pure white noise. Then, a thud, a dragging sound. I wrote it off as a fallen branch. Minutes later, a weak, sputtering car horn. Headlights motionless at the foot of my drive. Knocking came later, a man's voice, breathless, begging to come in from the cold. I cracked the door, chain locked. He was a statue of snow, shivering violently. But as I was about to relent, I looked down. His boots, they were spotless, dry. If he'd walked through that, they'd be buried. A cold deeper than winter shot through me. I said I'd call for help and shut the door. I called 911. As I spoke to the operator, I heard footsteps circle to the back of my house. Then the banging started. Not knocking, someone trying to break the door down. I grabbed a knife and locked myself in my bedroom. The assault stopped. Eventually, the police arrived. They found an abandoned car in a snowbank, engine cold. They told me there were no footprints leading from that car to my home. None. Only prints that started in my own driveway, as if he'd been dropped off. The next morning, in the stark sunlight, I found them. Muddy handprints smeared on the outside of my bedroom window. The police had missed them. Days later, I learned a house half a mile away was broken into during the storm. Nothing was stolen. Sometimes the most terrifying intruder isn't there for your things, but for something you can't name. Our final tale comes from the peaks of British Columbia, where the snow hides more than just rock. I was a pro skier, trained, certified. I knew the backcountry. That day, the forecast was mild, but the mountain had other plans. A wind shift, a visibility drop. I ignored the signs for one last run. An avalanche, small but brutal, caught me. I slammed into something hidden, my leg exploding in pain. I was alone, trapped in a gathering blizzard with a leg I couldn't stand on. As I began a hopeless, agonizing crawl downward, I heard it, the sound of skis cutting through powder behind me. I turned, and through the curtain of snow, another skier emerged. He moved to me with purpose, hooked my arm over his shoulders, and bore my weight. We began moving. I was saved, but the feeling was wrong. It wasn't relief, it was a deep, primal unease. He said strange things. "Haven't used my legs in so long," he muttered. I leaned against a tree, closing my eyes for just a few seconds to fight the pain. When I opened them, he was gone, vanished. I screamed into the white. There were no other tracks, just my lone, limping trail in the snow. He had been solid, real. I felt his shoulder, but the mountain showed no record of him. Somehow I made it to my car and to a hospital. A severe sprain, not a break. Incredible luck. Weeks later, restless, I found an article. A skier had gone missing on that same range a month before my accident, presumed dead. His body was never recovered. I tell myself it was a hallucination born of shock and pain, my mind's cruel trick to keep me moving. But I remember the solidity of him, the weight he carried for me. I still don't know what led me off that mountain, and I never ski alone anymore. If these stories gripped you, help others find them. A like on this video truly supports the channel. Winds of Thought. We hunt for the truth in the shadows, so you don't have to.